Listen, let me tell you a story about a young wife called Tommy and how a single sheet of paper nearly turned an entire family compound upside down before it brought them all more peace than they had known in months. But wait, let me start from the beginning because you need to understand exactly how deep this thing went. Tommy had moved into the Andrew family compound as Tunde's new wife, into a small detachable flat Baba Andrew had built years before, tucked behind the main house near the boys' quarters. It was meant exactly for situations like this, a newly married couple who weren't ready to leave the compound entirely but who needed their own four walls to call theirs. Your own kitchen, your own sitting room, your own front door, Baba had promised at the wedding send-off. But you are still on my land, still part of this family. Mama had clapped her hands with joy at the thought of having her son's wife close by. And even Kemi had hugged Tommy tightly that day, calling her my new sister in front of everybody. Tommy thought it sounded perfect. Her own space, with family only a few steps away, and a sister-in-law who already seemed to love her. That warmth did not survive the first 2 weeks. Tommy had barely settled into the flat, boxes still half unpacked in one corner, before she noticed something strange about her new sister-in-law. Kemi didn't seem to understand that a door with a lock on it was a door meant to be knocked on. She would stroll into the flat at whatever hour suited her, holding whatever she pleased, humming to herself as though she were simply walking from one room of her own house into another. The first time it happened, Kemi walked out with 2 of Tommy's dresses draped over her arm, dresses that had somehow ended up mixed into her own things during the chaos of moving in. "We're the same size now anyway," she said breezily, not even slowing her stride. Tommy smiled small and said nothing because she was still new, still trying to find her footing, still telling herself that every family needed time to adjust to a new face. But the small interruptions didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Kemi began appearing at odd hours to check in, staying far longer than any check-in ever required, talking loudly about nothing in particular, whether Tommy was resting, cooking, or simply trying to enjoy a quiet moment alone with her husband. And soon, Tommy began noticing something else. Her skincare, carefully arranged on the little shelf by her mirror, kept reducing itself bottle by bottle, level by level, as though something invisible was feeding on it in the night. She mentioned it to Tunde as soon as it started bothering her. "Baby, your sister doesn't knock. She takes things without asking. I've tried to let it go, but it's becoming too much." Tunde didn't brush it off. "That's not okay. Let me talk to her properly." And he did try, more than once, standing his ground each time. "Sis, you can't just walk into our flat without knocking. Tommy is my wife. This is our home, and you have to respect that the same way you'd want yours respected." He said it firmly, not as a suggestion, but as something he meant. Kemi would nod, mutter an apology, promise to do better, and then, somehow, within days, slide right back into the same habits, as though his words had simply bounced off her and landed on the floor unheard. Not long after, Tommy came home one afternoon to find her side of the wardrobe completely rearranged, her shoes shifted, her clothes refolded a different way entirely. When she asked about it, Kemi shrugged without apology. "I was just tidying. This is family property. Everywhere should look neat, not just your one corner." Tommy told Tunde again, and again he confronted his sister about it, his patience thinning with every repeat conversation. "Kemi, I'm not saying this again. Ask before you touch anything that isn't yours." But Kemi had a way of receiving correction sweetly in the moment and forgetting it completely by morning, as though each conversation existed in its own little bubble that never connected to the next. Then came a Saturday that Tommy would remember for a long time. Her cousin's traditional engagement, a proper Gen Z party with asoebi and a live band. The kind of event where a young wife wants to look her absolute best in front of people she hadn't seen since her own wedding. Tommy had planned her outfit for 2 weeks. A hand-beaded gele, a fitted dress she'd had specially sewn, gold accessories she'd been saving for exactly this kind of occasion. She laid everything out the night before, satisfied, excited, looking forward to a rare day of pure enjoyment. The morning of the event, she reached for her gele and found it gone. Not misplaced, gone. She searched the wardrobe, under the bed, behind the door, growing more frantic by the minute as the time to leave crept closer. It was Chooks, of all people, who mentioned casually over breakfast that he'd seen Kemi leaving the compound earlier that morning, looking fine, correct gele and everything, headed to a program of her own. Tommy's stomach dropped. She rushed to Kemi's room, empty of course, and confirmed it herself. Her gele, her exact one, simply taken without a word, worn to a different event entirely, while Tommy stood in her own flat with nothing to tie on her head and less than an hour to fix the problem. She called Kemi's phone. No answer. She called again, still nothing. By the time Tommy managed to borrow a plainer gele from a neighbor and arrived at her cousin's traditional engagement, the Asoebi photographs everyone had been coordinating for weeks were already halfway done, and she had missed the best part of the group picture, standing at the edge of the frame in borrowed cloth, while women she barely knew asked politely why her head tie didn't quite match. She came home that evening quieter than Tunde had ever seen her. And when he asked what was wrong, the whole story spilled out. Not with shouting this time, but with the flat, exhausted voice of someone who had simply run out of surprise. Chooks' jaw tightened as he listened. She did what? On the morning of your cousin's own event? He didn't wait for Tommy to ask him to act. He was already reaching for his phone to call his sister directly, voice hard in a way Tommy hadn't heard him before. Kemi, when she finally picked up, offered only sorry now. It was just sitting there and I needed something quickly, as though borrowing a woman's carefully chosen outfit on the morning of a major event was a small, forgivable inconvenience, rather than a wound. That was the moment something in Tommy began to harden, quietly, beneath the surface. She didn't shout, she didn't cry, not where anyone could see, but she began, without telling anyone, to think seriously about what it would take to finally make Kemi understand that these were not small things. Not long after, her own parents finally arranged to visit her new home for the first time since the wedding, a proper visit, with her mother already talking on the phone about how she couldn't wait to see how her daughter had settled in, how neat everything would surely look, how proud she was that her daughter had a whole flat to herself. Tommy spent 2 full days preparing, cleaning every corner, arranging her small sitting room exactly the way she wanted her parents to see it, cooking a special pepper soup the evening before so the flat would smell like a home properly lived in and cared for. That same evening, while the pot was still simmering on the stove, Kemi arrived with 3 of her own friends, phone speaker blasting music, announcing cheerfully that they were just passing the night in Tommy's sitting room because the main house's generator had developed a fault and her own room felt too hot without it. Tommy tried, as gently as her nerves would allow, to explain that her parents were coming first thing in the morning as she needed the flat quiet and presentable. Kemi waved a hand. Small noise, they won't even notice. Relax. They did not leave until almost 2 in the morning. Cups and plates scattered across the sitting room Tommy had spent 2 days perfecting. A cushion stained where a bottle of malt had tipped over unnoticed. The whole flat smelling of borrowed perfume instead of pepper soup. Tommy stayed up past 3, alone, cleaning in the dark so as not to wake Tunde, scrubbing a stain out of her good cushion cover with her own 2 hands, tears she refused to let fall burning at the corners of her eyes the entire time. Her parents arrived at 9 the next morning to a flat that looked, thankfully, presentable enough on the surface. But Tommy herself was hollow-eyed and distracted throughout the visit, forcing smiles through exhaustion, deflecting her mother's gentle question about whether everything was truly all right at her new home. "Everything is fine, Ma," she lied. Because how could she explain On the one day meant to make her parents proud, that she had spent the night before scrubbing juice stains left by her sister-in-law's uninvited guests. She said nothing to Kemi about it afterward, not because she had forgiven it, but because something in her had gone quiet in a different way now. Not the quiet of a woman adjusting, but the quiet of a woman keeping count. The evening everything finally broke open started over something as ordinary as a bedsheet. The good wine-colored set Tommy had bought specifically for her new flat. The one she found one evening draped casually over furniture in the main house's guest room while she was there returning a borrowed dish. "Kemi," she said, holding up a corner of it, her voice already tight from weeks of swallowing far too much. "This is from my flat." Kemi barely looked up from her phone. "I needed something nice for when my friends visited last week. I will bring it back." "You've had it a full week and you didn't ask. Just like the gele, just like everything else." It's just bed sheet, Tommy. Why do you always make noise about small things?" "It's not small when it keeps happening." Tommy's voice cracked upward, finally breaking past every ounce of calm she'd been forcing herself to hold on to. "The clothes, the cream, the wardrobe, my gele ruined on the one day I needed it most, my sitting room full of your friends till midnight, and now my bedsheet decorating your guest room like I don't exist in this compound." Kemi stood, tossing her phone on the sofa. "You this one that came into this family and you are now counting every thread like an auditor. This is my father's house. Everything here has always been shared. You're the one bringing this stranger behavior, not me." And there it was, the exact line that finally snapped the last thread holding Tommy's patience together. "Your father's house," Tommy repeated, voice shaking somewhere between fury and heartbreak. "You know what? You're right. It is your father's house. So maybe I shouldn't even be here at all." She turned and walked straight back to her own flat, Kemi trailing behind, confused by the sudden shift, still muttering something about bed sheets. Inside, Tommy yanked her old travel bag from under the bed and began throwing clothes into it, hands trembling, her voice raising loud enough to carry clean across the compound. "I'm not staying somewhere I'm treated like an intruder in my own marriage. I still can't own one bedsheet, one bottle of cream, one belly for one important day without somebody reminding me whose house this really is. Fine, let me leave then, since it's clearly not mine to stay in." The shouting reached the main house fast. Mama came running across the compound, wrapper nearly slipping off one shoulder, flip-flops slapping hard against the concrete. What is happening? Tommy, what are you doing?" Baba Andrew followed close behind, face already lined with alarm at the sight of his son's wife stuffing clothes into a bag, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I'm going, Ma," Tommy said, voice still shaking but firm. "I've tried, I've been patient, but apparently this compound only has room for one woman's comfort and it's not mine." No, Mama said quickly, catching Tommy's hands to still the packing entirely. "Sit down, my daughter, please. Nobody is chasing you from anywhere." Baba turned sharply towards Kemi, who had followed them in, arms crossed, suddenly looking much smaller than she had 5 minutes earlier. "Kemi, what did you do this time?" "Baba, I said, what did you do?" His voice cracked through the small flat like thunder. "First it was clothes, then cream, then her wardrobe, then you spoiled her outing on her cousin's own engagement day, and now bedsheet. Do you want your brothers married to scatter under my own roof because you cannot leave one thing alone?" Kemi opened her mouth, closed it again, no defense arriving fast enough to matter. Mama, still holding Tommy's hands, turned to look at her daughter properly.
Kemi, since this girl came into this family, you have not given her 1 week of peace, not one. You call yourself family, but family does not behave like this. You will apologize to her right now and you will start respecting her space, or I will personally lock that gate between the flat and this house myself.
Kemi's shoulders dropped, the fight draining out of her under both parents' combined fury. I'm sorry, Tommy. I didn't realize it had gotten this deep. I really didn't think of the gele as something that would matter this much. Tommy wiped her eyes quickly, still trembling, but something in the room had shifted. The ground beneath her suddenly steadier than it had felt in months, now that somebody had finally, properly taken her side without hesitation. Since everyone is already here, Tommy said, her voice steadier now, reaching into a drawer near her mirror. There's actually something I prepared. I wasn't planning to bring it out like this, but since we're all gathered. She pulled out a folder and placed 2 printed sheets on the small coffee table. Sign here first, she said, sliding one toward Kemi. Kemi stared at it, then at her parents' faces, neither one offering rescue this time, and finally picked up the paper, reading properly, no laughter left in her at all. Knock before entering the flat. Ask before borrowing anything, clothes included. No unannounced guests in the sitting room after 8. Return any borrowed item within a day. She looked up, some of her old fire trying weakly to resurface. You had this ready before tonight? Tommy said. I've had it ready for 2 weeks. I kept hoping I wouldn't need it. Tonight proved me wrong. Baba picked up the pen from the table himself and placed it firmly in front of his daughter. Sign it, Kemi, right now, in front of all of us. Kemi looked at the paper once more, glanced briefly at Tunde, who simply nodded at her, the same firm nod he'd been giving her for weeks, except this time, with their parents standing right there, there was finally nowhere left for her to slide out from under it, and picked up the pen. Fine, she muttered, signing with a shaky hand. I'll knock, I'll ask first. Happy?
Very happy, Tommy said quietly, the last of her tears finally drying. Mama exhaled loudly enough for the whole compound to hear. Thank God. I thought I would need to call the pastor for deliverance this evening. Chooks, who had been standing quietly by the doorway the whole time, finally spoke. Can I get a copy too? Just in case anybody enters my room without knocking, I want documentation ready. Despite everything, a tired laugh finally broke out around the small flat. Mama first, then Baba, then even Kemi, shaking her head at her younger brother's timing. Now, my people, you would think that was the end of the matter. But for the most part, it was. But 2 weeks after that signing, something happened that told the whole compound the paper had truly meant something. It was a Thursday evening, and Tommy had just returned from a long day, still in her work clothes, tired enough to fall asleep standing up. As she approached her own front door, she heard a soft, unfamiliar sound. A knock. Not the memory of a knock, an actual knock. Hesitant and almost shy, coming from the other side of her own door before she'd even reached it. She opened it to find Kemi standing there, hands folded in front of her, holding a small nylon bag. I bought suya on my way back, Kemi said, a little awkwardly, clearly unused to standing on this side of a door she'd once walked through freely. I wanted to ask if I could come in and share it with you. If you're too tired, I understand. I'll just drop it and go. Tommy blinked, genuinely surprised, before stepping aside with a small, real smile. Come in. Knocking suits you, you know. Kemi laughed, a little embarrassed. Don't get used to it. I'm still adjusting. They sat together that evening, eating suya in the small sitting room that had once been a battlefield of unspoken frustration. And for the first time since Tommy had moved into that compound, the silence between them felt comfortable rather than tense. Word of the whole saga eventually reached the extended family, the way these things always do in a compound where everybody knows everybody's business. Aunties who came to visit would tease Kemi gently. "Ah, so it's you they say signed contract for your brother's wife?" One of them laughed at a family gathering months later. "Very serious matter, oh. Where is this famous paper? Let us see it." Kemi, to her credit, laughed along rather than getting defensive. "Ah, leave me, jaw. Everybody makes mistakes. At least I corrected mine on paper, in writing, with my full signature. Some people are still making the same mistakes with nothing to show for it." And that, my people, became something of a family joke that followed Kemi for a long time afterward. Gentle teasing that she took with far more grace than anyone expected from the same woman who had once screeched her chair across the tiles in protest. As for Tommy and Tunde, the small, detachable flat behind the main house slowly stopped feeling like a battleground and started feeling like exactly what it was always meant to be, their own quiet corner of a much bigger family, close enough to lean on, far enough to breathe.
Thank you for watching till the end. If you ever find yourself living under one roof with someone who treats your space like it belongs to everybody but you, don't be afraid to put it down in black and white, sign it, and let the paper do the talking your voice got tired of doing alone. Please like, share, and subscribe. Bye!